Okay, hello YouTube. In this video I want to talk about Magnus Carlsen's style, and I want to kind of try to explain how Magnus Carlsen plays chess and how he approaches the game of chess from my perspective, and from what I've seen in his games and how he approaches the game of chess. Also, if you like this kind of content and if you like my channel, please check out the rest of my videos, and also please subscribe to the channel. It really does help me out, and it will really help me with keeping this content coming and keeping more and more videos coming. Anyways, back to the subject here. We have Magnus Carlsen, current world champion, probably one of the greatest players that ever lived, if not the greatest player that ever lived. So from my perspective, when we talk about Magnus Carlsen's style, we of course have to compare him to his peers. We have to compare him to other world champions and other grandmasters of his caliber, right? So I would say that his style probably falls somewhere in between the style of Robert J. Fischer and Anatoly Karpov in terms of world champions. He's like Robert J. Fischer in the sense that he's always pressing and always playing for a win. Magnus Carlsen is very much of the mind that all of his moves should fit together as part of a cohesive whole. Every single move in his games, he tries to make them all look like they fit, that they're all part of a plan. One move precedes the next move, and they all connect in the end. He's very good at that. Very good at always making that forward-looking progress, making the games look smooth, making the games keep pace. Very specific style where he keeps pace with his moves. And at the same time, he plays chess like Anatoly Karpov, right? Where Anatoly Karpov didn't care about pace. He didn't care about making his moves look like they fit together. Anatoly Karpov was like a person walking in sand on the beach, and then when the waves come by, all the footprints would disappear. Anatoly Karpov didn't care what his previous moves were. He only cared about maximizing all of his pieces in the position that he had on the board. I remember somebody said to me once, well, we should all play positions like this. And I remember saying, well, that's not so clear. It's not so clear that's the best way to approach chess, because you do want your pieces to kind of coordinate together. It's not just about every individual piece for himself. But Karpov would play chess like that. It was every individual piece for himself. Now, somehow Carlsen managed to combine these two styles, and he does so beautifully. He maximizes every piece while also allowing every single one of his pieces to constantly be coordinated, working together, and when you see the final picture at the end, it just looked like the game was always going in this direction. Okay, so Magnus Carlsen, when it comes to the opening phase of the game, he's not the world's most creative opening player. He plays really boring openings because he just wants to get to the part of the game where he's the best in the world, which is basically the middle game. And he just wants to start outplaying his opponents in these middle games just over and over and over again. And he'll even outplay them in end games over and over and over and over again. He's always had a weakness for theoretical end games, although that's gotten a lot better as he's been world champion. And I would say that at this point, I hardly see any weaknesses in his play at all. His theoretical end games are very good. I don't think there's hardly an opening that he plays that he's not familiar with. So it's hard to say. I mean, he could be world champion for even longer. I don't know exactly who's going to stop him right now. He's just one of the best players that's ever lived, and he just makes very few mistakes. So this was when he won the World Championship match back in 2013. He was playing against Viswanathan Anand, and he had the black pieces. And this game kind of exemplifies his style. The game is a Ruy Lopez, and Magnus Carlsen, again, he's playing a boring opening. He's not playing something crazy. He actually just plays a Berlin. You know, he's just trying to develop his pieces and get them on squares and get a position from which he can play chess. He's just, let's get our pieces out. Just a lot like a beginner would just get their pieces out. And then here, Rook E8, it's kind of a lesser-known move, but this is kind of what Magnus Carlsen does. The only way that he really surprises his opponents is he makes minor adjustments on already well-known ideas, and that's in Magnus Carlsen's own words. The normal move here is D6, but Magnus Carlsen kind of inserts Rook E8, which was lesser played at the time, but still pretty theoretical, and he's just going to put all of his pieces on solid squares and just play chess. And that's basically what happens. He forced Anand into a situation where they were both basically just playing chess. He develops his pieces, he breaks pins, he makes exchanges, and now he starts developing his knight kind of Briar variation style, and also a little Karpovian. He retreats his knight and brings it to d7, so that everything is coordinated and everything is working together and everything is part of this cohesive whole. But it's impossible to see any type of forward-moving plan here for black, but somehow Magnus Carlsen, from this point on, manages to outplay Anand so well that it's actually black that has the advantage after maybe another 10 moves. So Anand is making forward progress in the typical way that Ruy Lopez players do. He maneuvers his knights, and he wants to bring a knight to the f5 square. And Carlsen just plays the normal moves in the position, just trying to... He opens the A file, he's going to offer up exchanges, because exchanges are good for him, because he has a little less space. And he manages to exchange enough stuff. Now Anand has doubled pawns in the middle of the board, has doubled e-pawns right here. And that is enough of a middle game advantage for Magnus Carlsen to start pressing. So he just pushes his queenside pawns, exchanges, and then starts putting pressure on this e square. And just look, with every single move, Magnus Carlsen, he was making progress. c5, c4. Just so beautiful. Brings his queen up, starts making more progress. Exchanges, brings the rook to e5. Continuing to make progress, continuing to place pressure on these doubled e-pawns. He's going to start pressing and pressing for a win. Bringing his queen back to c7, just trying to maneuver queen c7, queen e7. Just, again, continually making progress. Now, in all this progress, what's really amazing is Magnus Carlsen doesn't have a huge advantage to write home about, not against a world-class player. This position should really just be equal. This should be equality. There is absolutely nothing special here. But somehow he manages to, he's just get this pawn, he's going to exchange. Now he's got the clean pawn. How is he going to make progress here? This is a 3-on-2. I mean, this is well known. You can't do anything with a 3-on-2. How in the world is Magnus Carlsen going to make progress? Well, first he just maintains the position, very Karpovian, and then he just starts advancing his kingside pawns, because why not? Let's just advance. So now Anand gives him these pawns here, these 3 pawns, and it's really well known that with these 3 pawns, it's very difficult to make any kind of forward-moving progress with these 3 pawns. You could actually, if they eliminated these pawns over here, if these came off the board and black won this extra pawn right here on g2, this position would still be a draw. That's what's so amazing, because somehow Magnus Carlsen goes on to win from here. And he does it in such a fluid, beautiful way by just continuing to make forward progress with his kingside pawns. It almost looks like that should just be the inevitable outcome of the game. And, of course, that's not true. The game legitimately should be a draw. But this is how Carlsen wins. He just keeps making arguably the best move, every single move, and he keeps threatening to win with every single move. He's so tricky. And he just puts pressure, 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 pressure. And then eventually, even the best players in the world crack. And what was annoying, in a sense, about this game is Anand, arguably, the 5-time world champion Vishy Anand, honestly one of the greatest players that ever lived, he cracked right at the end of all this. He almost had it, and he still cracked. And it was just all this pressure that Carlsen just builds and builds and builds. So what does he do? He's just making forward progress with his pawn. Just pushing forward as if a win is just the natural conclusion of what's going on. And you see, this is very Fischer-like. He's not Karpov-like in this sense. Karpov might have shuffled or something like this. No, not Carlsen. He's going to sacrifice some queenside pawns, and he's going to just keep making that forward progress, keep making that forward pressure. And again, here, with rook g8, I think a lot of players here, they may have been tempted at this point, just at some point, let's just shuffle. Magnus Carlsen makes progress with his rook, pushes the king back, brings his king over, and then this is the big part of the maneuver right here. Instead of just shuffling back and forth with his king, he could do this. He could easily just shuffle back and forth with his king, back and forth, call a draw. No, that's not what he does at all. He actually sacrifices the pawn on c4, gives white the opportunity to push this very dangerous passed b pawn, all so that he can continue moving his kingside pawns forward, because he believes that that's the only way that he can continue to put pressure on Anand to win. Carlsen always plays for a win. always putting the pressure, even when it's dangerous, even when he doesn't have to, because he's so confident in his ability to hold draws. He's so confident that the position is still a draw, even if this c-pawn disappears, that he's able to play for these wins very smoothly. So he brings his king forward, and then he just brings his king coldly forward again and says, here, go ahead, have my c-pawn. All I want to do is push my f-pawn forward. You can have your passed b-pawn. And I'm just going to, I know that I have a draw in the bag if I need it. I'm not worried about it. At this point, Anand should have actually played pawn to b4, and the computer says that if Anand plays pawn to b4 here, Anand should hold the draw. He has enough progress with this pawn to keep the draw in hand. Here, Anand finally cracks. Anand plays rook a4, question mark, and then Carlsen just, again, keeps moving forward to h3. This creates the passed pawn with the king cut off. This was the whole point of everything he was working towards in this position. The king is cut off in the position, and that makes this basically a classic Lucena type position, and this b pawn is just too far away to do anything. And after this, Carlsen wins the game by classic Lucena approach. He just brings that rook to the end, threatens to create a queen, and if he gets checked, he's going to shuffle his king out of the line of fire of the pawn while holding the pawn, and then when he gets checked again, he just marches this king back towards the rook until he touches it, and then he's going to play f1 equals queen, and because of this, Anand resigned this game. This game tells us everything we need to know about how Magnus Carlsen plays chess, and it tells us why Magnus Carlsen is just so impossible to play chess against, just even for the best players in the world, with either color. I mean, Magnus Carlsen seems to be able to win with white, seems to be able to win with black, and in spite of playing these ridiculously boring openings, he somehow has very few draws, and it's because of this uncompromising approach of both maximizing his pieces and continuing to make progress on a cohesive plan with every single move. He's one of the only players in the world that can do this. He's one of the only players in the world that's ever been able to do this, and he seems to be able to do it consistently. And because of this, he might be world champion for quite a bit longer. Anyways, I hope this explains Magnus Carlsen's style. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel and check out my other content. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you learned something new about chess.